Hello, this is David Bedford, and today for our Liverpool birthplace of the Beatles, we are in Woolton in Liverpool. Behind me is St Peter's Church, and it's the famous place where John Lennon and Paul McCartney met for the first time on the 6th of July 1957. The parade went all the way round the village of Woolton. And then they came up this hill, which is Church Road. They went past St Peter's Church Hall, where the meeting took place. We'll get to there a little bit later. But they went up the hill and up to the entrance of the church, and they went to play in the field behind there. A lot of his friends to see one grave in particular. That's the grave of his Uncle George, George Toogood Smith. As we come along the footpath, this is where John would have taken a lot of his friends to see one grave in particular. And that's the grave of his Uncle George, George Toogood Smith. George, of course, was Mimi's husband and the father figure in John's life. They were really close. Uncle George helped him to learn to read by reading from the Liverpool Echo. But it was the actual tragedy in June 1955 when George dropped dead very, very suddenly. John was naturally devastated, and his school friends have said they noticed a change in his attitude after that. This was the man he'd really looked on as a father, because of course his dad Alf was no longer around, and John was only 14, and a tragedy. But as you can see, George's middle name is Toogood, and with John loving playing with words, having an Uncle George was George Toogood Smith was almost too good to be true. So on that day, 6th of July 57, they would have taken a nod to Uncle George as he would have carried on down the path that would have taken him into the field, and that's where the Quarrymen played and Paul McCartney watched him for the very first time. Now, they would have been set up at the bottom of the field by these trees, and they would have been facing up the field, up towards what is now a school building. Up there was a scout hut, and actually Colin Hanson, drummer with the Quarrymen, he remembers Ivan bringing this strange lad into there and having a quick chat with John. This is before the meeting which took place later on in the church hall. The scout hut long gone, and so it's now a school. The Quarrymen, having played in the afternoon, crossed over the road and they went to the church hall. And it was here where they were due to play again in the evening. This is where the introduction took place. So as we come up to St Peter's Church Hall, what we know is there's a stage that used to be at the far end of the hall, which is not there anymore. And by that stage, John and his friends were by the piano, and they were looking like they knew what they were doing, even if they didn't really. And in through the door walked Ivan Vaughan. Now, of course, Ivan was John's friend from the age of 5 and Paul's friend from the Liverpool Institute. And because Ivan was friends with both John and Paul, he was the only connection between the two of them. So Ivan brings Paul over to John down by the stage, and they start talking. And the first thing Paul wants to know is, well, what the hell were you playing, John? And that's because John was playing banjo chords on his guitar, because he was taught to play by his mum, and his mum only played the banjo, so only used 4 or 5 of the strings. So once that's explained, the discussion gets going between Paul and John, and Ivan says to John, why don't you let Paul show you what he can do? And so Paul takes John's guitar. Well, the first thing he does is he tries to tune it, which is more than anybody else in the Quarrymen could do. But the most impressive thing was that he could play it upside down, because as we know, Paul is left-handed, but had learned to play a few songs on a right-handed guitar upside down. And so Paul takes John's guitar, turns it upside down, starts playing 20 Flight Rock. And in doing so, suddenly John realises not only can this lad play, can he tune a guitar, he can play it upside down, he knows all the words, and he can sing. Well, it wasn't the most tricky of decisions really from that point on, because what John decided was, if he was going to do rock and roll, which is what he really wanted to do, he needed somebody with Paul's ability to be in the group. And so Paul finished his audition, off he went home. A couple of weeks later, it was Pete Shotton who bumped into him and said, "Oh, Paul, me and John were talking, do you want to join the group?" Paul says, "Yeah, okay." And that was it. He was in. There was the plaque on the church hall, made from stone quarried locally. And the silhouette of the famous photo of John and the Quarrymen in St Peter's Field, commemorating when John and Paul first met. And on the plaque it says the Quarrymen, featuring Eric Griffiths, Colin Hanton, Rod Davis, John Lennon, Pete Shotton and Len Garry, performed on the afternoon of 6th of July 1957 at St Peter's Church Fete. In the evening before their performance in this hall, Ivan Vaughan, who sometimes played in the group, introduced his friend Paul McCartney to John Lennon. As John recalled, that was the day that I met Paul, that it started moving. So really, if you're looking for any place to be the beginning of the Beatles, then this is it. St Peter's Church Hall in Woolton on the 6th of July 1957. Join me next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Really supports us, we appreciate it. See you next time.